I'm Bob Dickie, and welcome to another episode of Taking the Leap podcast. Our guest today is Larry Wright Jr., who's the CEO and president of Wright Investments. His multi-generational family business represents over 200 hotels, 26,000 hotel rooms in 28 states. They specialize in hospitality investments, hospitality management, and the hotel and real estate capital projects. Larry graduated from the University of Tennessee with a degree in hotel and restaurant administration. He went on to get his master's degree at NYU and finally graduated from the Harvard Business School OPM program. Larry is a member of the Young Presidents Organization, also known as YPO, and is an avid outdoorsman. I'm really excited to learn more from Larry about the hospitality industry and the story about how his father got started, what Larry learned leading his company through the COVID shutdowns that radically impacted his business, and how he inspired confidence in his staff during challenging times. I also have questions on how he navigates the difficult political environment today while serving a diverse group of customers, why continued learning is very important to him in his career development, and what books have impacted him most. I really think this is going to be a fascinating discussion, so let's jump right in. Well, Larry, my friend, I tell you what, it's been a long time coming. I've been wanting to have you on the podcast here for a while. I appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule. Where in the world are you today? Because I know you're a world traveler. Where are you dialing in from?
Well, today's a little easier. I'm in Memphis, but 2 days ago I was in New York from a 6:40 a.m. flight, landed in Nashville, had a couple meetings, and then drove to Memphis in one day. So that was a kind of a little bit easier day in some ways. Do travel internationally for fun every now and again. Not as much for business, but travel all over the country quite a bit. And post COVID, I think the first 12 months I was in about 22 states. So I do value getting out there into the world. To your very good point.
Well, I tell you what, you're back in the great state of Tennessee, and I think post COVID, one of the things that you and I have seen. So you're also a graduate of the very distinguished and prestigious University of Tennessee, Go Vols. And we've got the number one baseball team in the country right now, and super regionals happening here in Knoxville this weekend. So going to be enjoying that with the family. But one of the things that I've really found interesting is I've absolutely loved the state of Tennessee. I wasn't born and raised here. I'm a Michigan boy, and came down on athletic scholarship to the university in the mid-'90s during the great Peyton Manning era, and fell in love with this incredible state, the incredible people, the diversity, the topography, and it was really interesting to see so many people from around the country discover this as a great place to raise a family. Great tax law, and great place to have a business. And my goodness, there has been a population explosion here in Tennessee over the last couple of years. I'm sure you're experiencing it there in Nashville and in Memphis as well, right?
Oh, absolutely. It's funny. I jokingly say, while I was spending time between Memphis and New York quite a bit, Tennessee became really cool, and it's really funny. It's I get texts from friends that I'm fortunate to have in different parts of the nation. Like there is a couple live right now that is like, Larry, we are moving to Nashville and we want to come hang out. And thankfully, it's a lot of great people that are, they want to contribute to the community. They aren't just moving there for just, kind of selfish reasons. They actually want to move, and then they move, they want to have like friends. They want to have, the philanthropic side. They want to have business. So I think, there's that healthy desire to be part of something that's a little bit more than just moving there for, tax refugee purposes or frankly, political refugee purposes. From some people leaving California, in their words. So it's a great state. Absolutely.
Well, I tell you what, it has just been booming. My brother-in-law has a large law firm in Franklin and in Nashville. And he's just been keeping his finger on the pulse of the economy there, and he's involved in all aspects of it. But the biggest aspect of his business is real estate law, and the real estate industry has just been booming. This is kind of like a good segue into a little bit of your industry. I mean, I take a look at Nashville over the last decade, and the high rises in downtown Nashville, iconic hotels coming in. It's becoming this cultural mecca, if you will, from all across the United States of people wanting to vacation and enjoy the nightlife and the music industry and the sports teams. And for that to happen, for this huge increase of travelers from all over the world coming to Nashville, you've got to have world-class hotels. And I absolutely love the hospitality industry. I love going to iconic hotels. And this is the industry that you've grown up in. You're part of a family business, and I really want to unpack this and really learn from you. Just a couple of data points here. Taking a look at Wright Investments, your website, you and your family, your group, you have been a part of over 200 hotels internationally, representing over 26,000 hotel rooms in 28 different states here within the United States. And when I think of hotels, I've got on one end of the hotel spectrum, you've got like those hotels for road warriors, right? Your Hampton Inns and your Marriotts. And I want you to unpack a little bit about that. But I also have some of my favorite memories with growing up, or with my wife, or with my children at iconic hotels around the world. I'm thinking about the Greenbrier Hotel in West Virginia, the Grand Hotel up in Mackinac Island in Michigan, or the Four Seasons in Washington, D.C., the Beverly Hills Hotel there in L.A. Just some of these great memories. And this is what you and your group are all a part of. You're a part of this hospitality industry, the full spectrum. So tell us a little bit about how you got involved in there and the origin story of your journey.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, it's really funny. I'm the oldest of five, and my dad started our company in 1982 when he was in his mid-30s, and he knew about as much about hotels as probably no one. he had stayed in hotels, but he did not understand it. There was in Memphis, there was the Kimmons Wilson story with the Wilson family and Holiday Inn, and they're actually, the grandsons are extremely close personal friends, and I fly fish and partner with them. Actually partnered on a hotel in Wyoming recently, and saw one of my good friends in New York this week. But there was already kind of an anchoring of that industry here, and he decided as a young man who was trying to figure out anything to do really well. He was always a hard worker, always very diligent, and just very entrepreneurial. He had been in the bond business and didn't love that as much, and got into real estate and formed a partnership with a gentleman that lasted a few years, and then went out on his own to found Wright in 1982. And for many years he was out trying to build his own brand called the Regis Inn, and that was a difficult time to do it. He did very well. I think at the end of the tax reform, 1986, that changed a lot of people's games. So there were some issues that occurred there, and I think what he realized after being going full personal recourse on a lot of loans at high leverage as just a pure entrepreneur, he realized after the 80s, he's like, what I'm going to do now is to spread the risk around a little bit, and do partnerships, and then we'll buy assets together. We'll work together with different communities, and to buy assets mostly in the Southeast. And so from the 90s on, we really, bought a lot of hotels in, Mississippi, Florida, Tennessee, Carolinas. And then I joined in 1999, and we bought our first hotel because, me being the brilliant, early 20s kid that could barely spell cap rate, knew that we needed to be in DC because the industry magazines that I was reading saying that was a great market. So I was able to actually implement a strategy to buy a hotel that was being sold by John Hancock in 1999, and we bought a 212-room Holiday Inn in downtown Washington, D.C., which turned out to be a phenomenal opportunity for us and a great deal for us. And then after I thought I had learned so much in the 2 years that I had worked, I wanted to move to New York to get my master's in real estate at NYU. I'd looked at Cornell. I was already in my 20s. I didn't want to necessarily go live in Cornell and in Ithaca, which is a great place, but I wanted a little more energy, and I wanted to be around kind of where the deals were being made, and so moved to New York the day before 9/11, if you can believe my great timing there, which was goodness. Yeah. What you learn about that are multifaceted, right? From a business side, I wrote an article about market cycles during that time, and the article actually was published and was required reading for people at Cornell and things like that, which I still find to be funny. And I have a very, very close friend that was required reading for him, and he still thinks that I'm smarter than I am because because of that. But I learned too from a market cycle perspective and human resiliency is that when things happen, i.e. Pearl Harbors or 9/11s or things like that, it draws people together. And my first impression as living in New York and going to school was that obviously of tragedy, but also the beautiful strength and resiliency of the human spirit. It was where people, they came together. They started to look at each other a little bit differently on the sidewalk when they walked by them. They made eye contact with people and kind of gave a nod, to where, hey, we're all in this together to a certain extent. And it sounds very odd to say that today in the context of a post-COVID world where, the divisive kind of, fear of like not even making eye contact with anyone because it could invite, personal connection, is very different. And kind of overlapping, with the business discussion and the origin story and how we've grown is to recognize, to weave into the world, like what's human nature, what do people do in any given point when they've got time and money. They like to travel and spend time around each other. So post 9/11, we looked at markets that didn't require people getting on an airplane, some of the smaller drive to leisure markets that became way back in vogue again after COVID. And so we had already had a lot of those on our radar. So when COVID happened, I had already had the kind of psychological, mapping to be able to say, hey, we've got, we know where to go. And we'd already gone to places like Hilton Head and upstate New York, Lake Placid, Jackson, Wyoming. Post-COVID, we bought in Jackson, Wyoming for the second time. We bought in Sedona, Arizona. That was getting a lot of California travel. We bought in downtown Charleston, which is where people were traveling to the southeast, where they couldn't really travel as much to a lot of, more restrictive states that wouldn't allow people to travel. People forget about the things that occurred during that time, but I mean, Nantucket as an area restricted travel to that area if you didn't have a Massachusetts tag. I mean, there were a lot of things that went on during that time that are almost difficult to believe in today's world. Right. And as a hotelier and as a person who thinks about real estate and how that all works together, you have to be a behavioral finance psychologist as well as as somewhat of a political a watchdog to understand kind of how things work because it impacts your business.
Well, you've lived through two really iconic events in our lifetime that really have impacted business, both 9/11. I was in the military at the time, and then COVID. Right. And, and so that really impacted all businesses, but specifically both of those impacted travel, people staying in hotels around the world. I want to get into some of the learnings that you've learned on how to, as a business leader and an entrepreneur, how to navigate those challenging times, the things that you've learned. But one thing that I don't want to miss this, I want to go back if we could, just for a brief moment. The origin story of how your family gets involved in this business. Your dad's in Memphis, and I found something really interesting. You said my dad didn't know anything about hospitality or hotels, but he happened to, and like, hold on a second, like, so he didn't know anything about this, yet he's deciding to get involved in this industry. And I'd like to just maybe peel the layer of that onion back a little bit. You also mentioned something else that was very interesting. It sounds like a couple of iconic businessmen, leaders in the area who were also involved in the hotel space, that maybe your dad was friends with or connected with. And so he was seeing something, maybe he was learning from them. Was he mentored by them? Somehow he got this idea of like, this is what I want to do. I'd like to unpack that origin story of like, maybe what inspired your dad? What did he see? Who was mentoring him? Because then he's obviously done a great job of like building this business, and then you're following in your father's footsteps.
Yeah, so I think if you think about a lot of industries, there's an anchoring of if you see companies or industries, there's always the spin-offs in whatever. Like if it's I guess around Seattle, you have a lot of tech, right? There's some large firms that have created a lot of anchoring of talent aggregation, and so a lot of that talent aggregation occurs, and that was Memphis, a lot with Holiday Inn in the 50s and in the 50s and 60s and 70s. And so a lot of people, read headlines about successful entrepreneurs. And there had been obviously cotton entrepreneurs. There had been, intermodal and other types of, logistics, entrepreneurs. And he had gotten into it through kind of real estate and then had an opportunity to manage a hotel. And I think somebody said, hey, we want you guys we're looking for somebody to help us here. And he was kind of like, I know how to manage just about anything. So he had the confidence to do that. But he had friends, that were in the business. There wasn't a one specific mentor. I think it was just kind of the surrounding of being in the industry and knowing others that had been successful. So he had friends in the business, but it was more of just kind of just a general view that, hey, this is a good model. People are doing well in this, and let me jump on it. He's very much a man of action, and sometimes I'm a little more thoughtful about saying, hey, let's slow down. Let's figure out how do we do this on a really large scale, or do it a little bit differently. And I sometimes wish I was a little more action oriented, and I think I sometimes wished he was a little more strategic in certain ways. So you hear that about Sam Walton. Like I remember somebody saying about his kids, they were like he didn't have this grand plan to start off with. It was more about just kind of growing and doing it. So I think there's the entrepreneurial spirit is not monolithic. It is about how do you see opportunities and how do you identify those, and then how do you really kind of take advantage of those while understanding the world's going to throw things at you that you can't understand, and there's going to be other things that you have to navigate through. But yeah, a lot of support, from my mom. She kind of was always, willing to, be there and to support kind of anything. And she had, kids, and he was out running around. And so, he was always, whenever he was at home, he didn't go out and golf as much and wasn't out at, a lot of dinners. He came home, and I remember him putting Kit Kats in the top shelf of the refrigerator, which was a big deal for dinner at some point. So I couldn't reach it until after dinner there. So he was around a lot, but there were times when, I remember I was like, hey, where's Dad? So, everybody I think has those stories, and it was a different time when it was, people were out on the road quite a bit. So, but it was really good for him to do that. He had a partner named Wayne Smith that was a partner for several years, but afterwards, he retired after a few years. He was a little bit older, and then really just kind of, off to the races after the 90s, really putting partnerships together, utilizing capital to, grow into different markets, identifying what brands were the best brands, working with not only IHG, which is, Holiday Inn parent company now, but working with Marriott, working with Hilton. And you learn a lot from those other brands, and they introduce you to other people. So it's kind of like that iterative learning process that you kind of aggregate from just a lot of great people in the industry that is to this day is a very friendly industry. It's changed just a little bit after COVID because there's more new market entrants. And so I think it's a little more professionalized, a little more, I'd say, private equity backed, but I think at the same time, still an amazing industry. And I just saw probably 2,000 people at the NYU conference, and I probably know a good 500 of them actually pretty darn well. And you go to these conferences many times a year, and in COVID, I was like, I'm gonna miss these people because you didn't know where things were headed, and you see these people, and you really appreciate the longevity and the quality of really, many of the relationships. Not everybody, but you really love a lot of great people that are there.
So it sounds like your dad kind of got started right place, right time, saw things that were happening, and if obviously this is before you and I were born, but I've done reading and the study of the 50s and the 60s. The interstate system is developing and growing. You've got an automotive industry that's booming. Mobility within the United States is rapidly increasing, and extra disposable income. In some respects, a little bit of a heyday for the United States post World War II growth. And I remember as a little boy traveling with my parents, and when you were driving down the highway and you saw a Holiday Inn sign, it was like, oh, we were always like, let's stop there. We wanted, because the indoor pool, right? It was like, that was one of those places that families that were traveling with little kids, the kids be like, oh, we want to stay at the Holiday Inn. And it feels like the Holiday Inn was one of those American brands built on the interstate system for travelers and so forth. How do you see the business changing over the years, right? I mean, like, to your point, it's a little while ago, you said, man, there's this explosion of various hotel chains and brands, and I can't keep track of them all. I'm like, who's the target demographic for this? And so, can you unpack maybe a little bit about the history and how it's maybe the business model has changed, and what all these various brands that are coming on board?
Well, it's a great question, and I was just with some Marriott people, went to their big Marriott's Mina, but that means their full service conference in the Caymans. And, they do the presentations, and they've got, it's hard for me to keep up. And they'll even, the ones well will actually give you the wink and be like, yeah, we've got a new brand. Because I jokingly say it's kind of like the, Gremlins when they get the water poured on them, and they just kind of continue to breed the brands. Yeah, they just multiply. There's, the big brands have got, they really do create a lot of value, and there are a lot of travel niches. Would everybody, even owners and the brand creators, be able to say, here's the bright line where, one brand ends and another begins? And I think the answer is probably no, because there's a lot of, real estate is by definition, uniquely specific to that location and to that building and to that area. So each brand can have and you did a good job of it, laying out the Four Seasons and some of these other iconic locations and brands. So does it matter if the Greenbrier, for example, has a certain brand on it? Well, it matters to the people who are traveling and using, the Courtyards or the Hampton Inns or the, Holiday Inns, and they're gathering points on their business travel each year. And then they want to take their families on a vacation to, Lake Placid or Jackson, Wyoming, or, some other place. And that's usually what we see. And so without getting too granular, there's a reward system that does drive that business. And the brands are creating so many. I think the consistencies of what we need to think about are the things that we, kind of let the world be what it is that humans are going to travel. They need to travel for business. They need to travel for social, groups. They need to travel for family trips. And so knowing where people want to go, and if they walk outside and they feel like, hey, this is a good area, this is a great hotel, destinations that are unique, something like the Greenbrier, something like, only places like Sedona in the world, only places like Broadway in Nashville, Beale Street in Memphis. There are these iconic places that, people want to see. And a lot of times we've seen, and I'm going to use a horrible word that we all kind of make fun of, but bleisure, business and leisure overlapping.
Okay. Yeah.
Some of my friends would throw spitballs at me if they knew I was using that word out loud. But it is true. People want to, they go to a business destination, they've got a conference or they have a reason to be there, and then their family comes along with them for the weekend or whatever. And so there is the recognition that people want to have a scenario where they like to do business and to be in places, not be in just a conference room for 2 days, but hey, when you're done with your meetings, where do you step out into? You step out into, an area, you go to Beale Street and go out, listen to some blues. Do you go to Knoxville and you walk down Gay Street and you've got an iconic, theater there? Do you walk down, down the street to Times Square? Do you walk down the street to, the beach in Hilton Head? There's a lot of that overlap. So great destinations in safety and security, and food and beverage options. All of that it doesn't happen by accident, and when it goes in the wrong direction, as we've seen places like San Francisco and downtown LA and parts of Chicago, and I put my hand over my heart, hope that those places recover better, but they're struggling, and just talking about capital redistribution around the nation, just see that everybody in the capital side is siphoning capital into these southeastern markets, to the point where I'm like, guys, you need to stay out of here and go put some money into other places, because I feel like it's gotten a little bit crowded in the areas where we've historically always been successful.
It sounds like, I mean, as I've done some research on your particular firm, you're really focused in on these locations, destinations, right, where bleisure potentially happens, right? And I tell you what, my family, they have partaken of my excessive travel schedule, and I've had a conference at the Grand Wailea in Maui. My wife and kids are like, yeah, Dad, we're going with you on that one, right? When I've been up in Mackinac, the kids will be like, yeah, Dad, we'll go with you on that trip there as well. So, but it sounds like your business model is focused more on those destination hotels and placing yourself in those target markets that are growing, that people want to be a part of, and that there's probably a completely different business model. A different firm would be focused more on, say, the interstate hotel system, right? Like making sure that their hotels are at geographically separated points along I-40 or 75 for, do you have friends that are opposite of you, and they're also in the hospitality space, but their business model is completely different? And how do those two, maybe can you compare and contrast?
And it's a great point. And I'd say that, there's only so much time that you have in the world, right? And I think there's a good argument for all different types of models. What we are in the hotel business, we have one-night leases, right? Unlike, multifamily or office or industrial or retail, so we're very sensitive to new supply. And if the demand is outgrowing, all the new, the existing asset base there, then, it does make sense to build. However, what we see in the world is that typically people build whenever they have the money to build. So whenever you see, 3 or 4 hotels at an intersection, and you see, 2 fields on either side of the interstate, well, as soon as the numbers in those 4 properties, become attractive and, they're doing well, then it makes it very easy to have 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 new hotels built at that intersection, and thus drive everybody's performance lower. And, that's a very fundamental way for me to say it, but we've seen it. So where we've tried to invest intelligently over time is to be more in areas where it's a little bit more difficult to build. We call that barriers to new competitive supply on our side. Or where you've got just a great location at a better financial basis that creates kind of success day one. Again, places like, Lake Placid or beaches, or places like, Jackson, Wyoming, where you just don't have, you got a finite amount of land. You've got, I call it the NIMBY mindedness, not in my backyard. They don't want to see anything built there. Sometimes we call them the People's Republic of, because they don't want to see anything happen in the Santa Monicas or the Nantuckets or places like that. So not always can we get to those places. There's a finite number of those types of markets out there. So you find some great urban locations that have, good fundamentals of growth. So we're not, we kind of don't redline anything and everything. So, there may be, and I wouldn't want to be a hypocrite to say we would never do a deal at an intersection. It's just much harder to do it, and we have limited time of the day. So we'd rather stick to. I've been called a location snob, and I thought it was a compliment. Yeah. So we want to be in those areas, in those places where we see that a little bit.
Well, it's really interesting to hear you say that, because it's almost as if like the barrier of entry. And that protection is one of the key critical things that you're focusing early on. So to be able to protect occupancy rates, then obviously able to protect margins, and then therefore be able to protect. If you get someplace where all of that can be eroded rather quickly by a new entrant, then the entire investment starts to unwind and is not as lucrative. That's very fascinating. let's talk a little bit about what you saw, maybe post-COVID, like during COVID. Let's maybe start there. During COVID, how did your business model change? And as a leader who is in charge of helping manage all sorts of investments, I would imagine that your business model was fundamentally under threat, and that you had to like pivot and iterate and look at the world through new lenses. I've heard business leaders talking about reacting very quickly. What was happening within your space in hospitality, and if you were able to maybe share some of those learning experiences, and coming out of it, it's like, what we learned, we had to do this, or these are key learnings that we had from that you'll carry with you for the rest of your business career.
Yeah, no, there's so many. Fundamentally, I think you have to be able to communicate with your team that, hey, we're doing everything that we can, because it was the most stressful thing that you could possibly imagine, right?
Yeah.
From our industry, I had a young guy downs that nobody could ever say, hey, we're going to shut your business down. Like, that's not something that a lot of people can kind of identify with. So you were just like, okay, this is what we do, and truly, had I not been of a certain kind of age and maturity, and always kind of, read the books of, Marcus Aurelius and Winston Churchill, and, pushed myself into travel to other areas that, require training and, physical endurance and kind of psychological endurance, I don't know if I would have been able to handle it as well. And by the way, I handled it really well, but we all made mistakes. And one thing that I said to my team was this. I said, guys, this is going to be a very difficult time, and we're going to make mistakes, but we're not going to make any mistakes of integrity, and you will always have our total support. And, I think that all you can do sometimes as a leader is to try to, when you don't, it's hard to find a hopeful narrative when, everybody's at home and the world's going crazy, and then of course you have the riots in urban areas, and then it's a highly politicized environment, and you have people that are guests and employees wearing face masks, and they can't see the other person's smile, which is so disarming. Yeah. So we put lanyards on people in certain hotels where it was like a picture of the smiling employee, because everybody perceives everybody to be slightly angry. And you've got to just kind of destigmatize that. That's when you walk into a hotel and somebody smiles at you. If you've been busted on 2 flights and it's raining and it took you forever and you're tired and you didn't sleep the night before at the other hotel, when that guest walks through the door and there's that smile, hey, this is all going to be okay. That was more difficult. Even that small little touch point made it more difficult. And then, by the way, people are wearing political slogans, on masks and on all sides. And I had to tell our team, team members, like, no political slogans on masks, and there was so much emotion during that time. And a lot of our team members in the corporate side, were able to sit at home during that time, but the employees at the property, they had to show up, and I had to live the brand and travel around a lot and try to go to the properties and try to, show that, hey, we're here, we're supporting you. But I mean, it was everything you can possibly imagine. And then on the, on the financial side, you went to every line item on a property. We used to have this thing called every week called accounts payable court, and it was like, okay, we're talking with the local taxing authority to say, hey guys, we need to have a discussion. We're a hotel, and this is happening to us, or talk to vendors, or talk to all of that. And then we got a business that was actually thriving during COVID. And he goes, Larry, how you doing? And I was like, it's been tough. And I was kind of smiling, like, I'm happy to be here having a drink with my good friend. And he goes, I explained to him kind of how things had been a little bit more. And I'd seen him and talked to him, but he goes, wow, Larry. He's like, that's like most of your customers going away overnight. I was like, yeah. And he goes, like, wow.
Like 100%. Yeah, like 100% of my customers going away overnight.
And I think that was one of the things during COVID that was difficult for a lot of people that had businesses that were impacted, because it hit a lot of people asymmetrically, and I think, there were people that loved it. They were able to spend a lot more time. They worked out more. They gained weight more. They watched more Netflix and drank and ate, whatever. but for us, I mean, we had actually some great times. Don't get me wrong, but it was a lot of game on. You were working a lot, and was very fortunate. I can tell you though, on a positive side, I was turkey hunting in Tennessee at our farm, about 45 minutes from Memphis, the first time in April when one of our hotels hit 100% occupancy, and I looked at my phone. And I may have had a tear in my eye of happiness when it happened, because I knew, I was like, all right, things are coming back here, and you knew that that was going to happen, because post 9/11, you saw that human spirit come back, right? And so I think what we can always bank on in a kind of a beautiful circular statement is to say that you can bank that people need to be around each other in person. They need to break bread with each other. They need to share stories together. And the human spirit is resilient. And that's kind of a beautiful thing that we did see out of COVID.
Well, I want to touch on that a little bit further. As a business leader who is leading in such a tumultuous time where, like you said earlier, the world was so divided and people were very opinionated and huddling into, it was interestingly, either you're for this or you're against this, you're right, you're left. It was like the world seemed to be split right down the middle on virtually every issue. And so there are some businesses, organizations in the United States where, they can kind of take a look at their demographic, their client base, and say, we are firmly on this side. We only deal with customers that are on this side of this particular issue. You are one of the many where people walking through your front doors to stay at your hotels, they're on all sides. You're right. You're literally right in the middle. And so I'm curious if you learned anything as you were working with your staff, your management team, saying, guys, we can't take, there's no sides here. We're serving everybody.
Right.
Everybody deserves respect, and we're gonna have a wide variety of people walking through our doors with opinions, and our job is to love them and to serve them and to have a smile on our face and to not be divisive. Right. And so were there things that you learned? I love that idea that you put that smiling face on the lanyard to kind of disarm people, because a smile is so important. Any other learnings that you had during that time frame to navigate?
It's a great subject, but there's old English law that informs a lot of law in the U.S. around who comes into a hotel, because it used to be old English times, there were the highwaymen, the highway robbers, that an inn or a hotel now was a place of refuge, right? And so you had to, by law, as long as they were willing to pay and they weren't doing anything wrong, accept them into your hotel, which is in many ways transcends a lot of hospitality, religious, views of the world, of all religions, across the world in time immemorial. And so, there was some situations that we had that almost seems surreal to talk about today, when there was even the January 6th time period. We had have a hotel in that area, and have an African American general manager who's a good friend. And I remember he was getting emails calling him racist during this time, and I was saying, obviously we kind of got a little gallows humor about that, but during that time, it was like, how do we know who to let into the hotel? And I said, guys, we let anybody in if they're dressed in a chicken costume, as long as they are paying and they are following the law. We've had protocols in place for people that weren't doing either forever. So we don't make judgment calls on that. And that's a really extreme example of it. But I mean, my view was, we love everybody. We're not choosing any kind of sides that are going to look bad in the past. And we have a consistent, value system that is, we believe in integrity, we believe in diligence, we believe in evolution learning, and then we believe in inspiration and fun and positivity, like a Maslow's hierarchy of needs there. And so we stick to our guns. We don't change. Our values don't change when the headlines change. And that was very difficult. And there was a lot of, I felt it in, my chest, like the desire, the pressure to say something about something. And we really kind of steered out of that and I would see it happen. And it was such a weird time that, usually you don't feel that kind of pressure, but I think a lot of people succumb to it on either side or whatever side. And I think that, as you learn the facts about what was truly going on and, whose motive was what about either side, you just kind of have to look back and see how's this going to age. And, if you have values that have been tested and time tested, as long as you stick to those, then you don't really have so much to worry about. It's like, it's kind of like trying to say, parachute pants are the greatest pair of pants forever. Yeah. And they go out of style, right? Yeah. Or whatever it is, things are trendy and, movements can be very trendy, but you try to stick to those values independent of what is going on out there. And that can be a very difficult and kind of lonely place to feel sometimes there.
Especially when you're a leader and people are, it's almost like we've entered into this period in culture where people want to force you to pick a side and make a statement, right? It can be very difficult to say, you know what, I don't want to wade into this particular issue. I just want to focus on business. I want to focus on life. I don't feel like I'm called to speak out on this particular thing. And you're like, no, you have to pick a side. I'm like, maybe I don't want to pick a side, right? Maybe I just want to steer clear of this for a while. So maybe getting off the political aspect of the industry and the changes that you were having to navigate as a business leader, what do you see? And we're living through such a tumultuous time in business in general. The world is just rapidly changing. You're seeing how AI is impacting everything. I was just talking with a YPOer who is running restaurants and Dunkin' Donuts franchises all across the Middle East. And she's talking about how she's studying AI and how AI is going to impact her business. And I was sitting there scratching my head. So like, hold on a second. You're literally in the restaurant and the donut business, and she's looking at how AI is going to impact that industry. And it's amazing how quickly things are changing. What do you see? What's the future of your industry? How's things rapidly changing? Where's it going?
Wow, it's such a big subject, and I've had some dark moments of because I like to think about the downside of anything, not because I'd like to live in a stasis of fear. It actually is to think about, it's like wargaming any scenario. Hey, what can happen here? And if we think about this downside as a 5 or 10 or 20%, option, then how do you kind of find your way around it and empower yourself? The opposite of a stasis of fear, empower yourself with whatever action you can take to try to figure that out. So I think that where I guess I've had a little bit of fear, and then how do you game around that? The AI is a challenge because I don't know in some ways how you game around it in certain ways, but my concern a little bit is that a lot of jobs that were once, drivers of just an economy or just, the world at large, there may not be as many graphic designers. There may not be as many lawyers. There may not be, as many pick your other kind of, industry. There may not be as many of those people. And, used to be that there was a reshuffling that could occur over a kind of relatively healthy period of time. Let's use the cotton gin or, the personal computer or other, kind of disruptive technologies. But the speed and the magnitude with which AI, is occurring and will occur is a little daunting. And I hope that I'm a little over concerned about it. Sometimes I can be, which I'd rather be slightly about it. There's not a whole lot you can do except to say that, people travel, people have to live in a home. We're getting more into the multifamily investment space, which is what we've done. And then to see what other trends that will arise through that. And, I've done a lot of, education since I got out of the University of Tennessee, which is a great university, by the way.
The prestigious University of Tennessee. Always got to put that in there.
That's right. Little plug. And so I know that we always figure things out. This one's going to be a big one. And how do we as a world and society and as a nation and as a company and as individuals, how do we kind of, unwind how we, explore that potential and how do we change it to our benefit is number one, right? There's a lot of great ways to do that. But on a kind of a more macro basis, I think it's going to make some big changes that we'll all ultimately have to chase. So I don't know if I mean, it's benefited us immediately by some kind of chat GPT discussions and, some things like that, and a reduction of other kind of, people side on the tech side. We haven't personally, as a company, exited anybody based on that. But I think that that's happened in other firms, or there's a little bit less hiring. So you worry that this idea of universal basic income could be something that, that's why that's being driven by the tech lords in some ways, because they believe that it's going to remove that. I believe that work is dignity. I believe that there is, the idea that, people would be happy sitting at home and being a consumer, I think is a very negative thing throughout the history of mankind. Any kind of contribution, anything is work. And I remember hearing this from a Marriott very senior executive when he had to lay off a lot of people, and he looked at me in the eye. And it was not long after COVID happened. It was at a conference, and he looked at me, and he has a great Irish accent. He's like, Larry, I'm gonna mangle his accent. And he's like, work is dignity, because he had to lay off people he knew for a long time. I remember being on a phone call with a Marriott person in a group call, and she texted me and said, "I'm sorry if I don't seem like my head's in this game, but several of us just got furloughed for several months." And you just that that's a very, very, very painful thing to happen to people, because not only is that an income, but that's their social world to a certain extent. That's their dignity. And so that that mission that we all need to have is something that needs to be highly considered. And work is it's a mission, it's dignity, and I'm worried that AI could remove some of that. And I think we need to make sure that we think, as a society in the U.S. and then around the world, we consider those issues.
Wow, such an important conversation to have, and I'm very passionate about that. I've literally written 2 books on the topic, and just the value and the importance of work. I am a believer, like you, that work is dignity. It becomes part of your identity in many respects. It is your social circle. I think based on my faith background and beliefs, I just fundamentally believe that each human is unique and distinctive in their own way, that nobody is a mistake, that everybody is here for a purpose and a reason, and that we get more joy and satisfaction out of giving and being fundamentally involved in our community and helping, whatever it may be. Whether I'm out mowing my yard or I'm helping the next door neighbor, it could be something as menial as that, or serving on a committee, serving on a board, being engaged with my church or my children's school. If I'm involved in the community and I feel like I'm giving back, that's where I get the greatest sense of joy in my life. And I can't imagine living a life where it'd be like, hey, I've got magic money that shows up in the mailbox and I just get to sit at home and watch Netflix and I don't know, like I would literally go out of my mind. And totally agree with you. And some of the things that we've seen when you take a look at the various revolutions that have happened around the world, a lot of times it comes from a disenfranchised youth that does not feel like there's any hope or optimism, that they've been locked out of the economy. There is no opportunity. Idle hands, right? We know. We've heard the old quote, idle hands, right? It's workshop. That's right. And it's like, so it's so important. And so I love talking with business leaders who love their various industries. It's fascinating how many different ways there are to give back and work and provide value in the world, and business leaders who are providing opportunity and jobs, and through the course of that, hope and optimism, the way that you take care of your staff and the things that you do, the educational opportunities. And speaking of educational opportunities, maybe that's a good segue into this particular topic. Education is really important to you. So not only we joke that you've graduated from the prestigious University of Tennessee, but you also went on to get a master's degree at NYU, and then just recently graduated from the Harvard Business School Owner-President's Program, which is OPM, which is a very difficult program to get into. It's a very time-consuming program, over 3 years to be able to graduate from that. Tell me a little bit about why you made the decision to do an advanced degree at your age. And your place. I mean, there's a lot of people probably like, Larry, you've got a family business. You're the CEO and president. Nobody's forcing you to do this. Why are you going to take 3 years and a bunch of money and go get an advanced degree? But you saw value. So why did you do it? And then what did you learn through the process? How has that impacted your life and your business?
Well, it is a great question, and for me, it's the term future proof, right? It's the recognition that the world is always evolving and always changing, and there's no, hey, I've learned everything, right? When it's the old Mark Twain quote a little bit, when he said, I'm going to paraphrase it and probably mangle it, but effectively he said, when my dad was, or when I was 15, my dad didn't know anything. By the time I was 21, it was amazing how much he'd learned, right? So
Yeah.
we know that the world is always going to evolve and change. And I have a desire to, I think it's an innate desire for just kind of every organism to recognize that you got to kind of stay ahead of the game a little bit. But there's in terms of human nature, it's curiosity didn't kill the cat, right? It's the cat probably died of an overdose of mice or something, but curiosity and the desire to grow and to future proof yourself against whatever else is out there in the world. Having seen enough and studied enough history, and I love history, that you need friends in all different types of places.
Mm-hmm.
You need to increase knowledge, and you need to be able to interpret the world. And I can tell you, I was one of the few people from the Southeast U.S. there. It was about 150 people in nearly 40 different countries, and so it opened my world up. And I know that the more I learn, the more humility that I have,
Mm-hmm.
the more I know I don't know things, and so it increases my desire to learn and to share that too with people, and to say, let's all learn together. And I can be really good at Trivial Pursuit sometimes, and that's that's good. But I want to share it with people, and I love to engage with people who share a desire to learn, because sometimes you're learning from somebody else, and then sometimes they're learning from you. And I always want to be open to listening and learning to other people. And I think that sharing of knowledge that people have together is one of the most beautiful things out there. And having people, comfortable enough with each other and having enough trust with each other to know that someone is trying to actually learn and to teach in a positive way that is not in a kind of a negative self-interested way, but in the beautiful kind of let's raise all boats type of way is what I saw a lot at the Harvard Business School in one of the most touching ways I've ever seen, with people from backgrounds of all different nationalities, all different religions. I went to a Shabbat dinner the last day of the program, and it was everybody there. There was, Tennessee Protestants, raise my hand, Mexican Catholics, Pakistani Muslims, and 60, 70 people, sharing food together in the most beautiful way that gives you hope for humanity in so many ways. And so, not only is there the business aspect of it, but there's the human component of it that really truly makes you you have faith in humanity over time.
Well, I would share that viewpoint, and I remember when I started my journey on the Harvard Business School President's Program. I thought that the majority of the learnings that I would have would come from the professors and the case studies, classroom material. And over the course of my journey, I realized that by far the greatest learnings and impact on my life were not coming in the classroom and through the case studies, but actually through the participants in the program, the incredible diversity from all across the world, race, religion, ethnicity. And it was the private conversations that were happening late at night. It was the small group forums and meetings where people were opening up and sharing their journey and their life and things that they had struggled with, their hopes, their fears. And you realize that, and I've said this so many times on this podcast, but that we have, when you get to know people, we have so much more in common than we have differences. And the thing that just frustrates me about what we see in maybe the mainstream media is it feels like all that's celebrated or talked about are differences, And what I've experienced through my travels, through my learnings, is that no matter where you go, you've got far more in common than differences. And I think the other thing that I found, this is both was exciting for me, but it's also something I'm a little bit troubled about at the moment. I share about those learning environments and how impactful they were. I loved the opportunity in an academic environment to be able to close the door. And there were multiple times where we did this, where there was something happening in the world. Let's call it maybe the Arab Spring, things that were going on, where we would close the door and said, you know what, this is a safe space, and let's talk about it. Let's discuss it. Where we had members with like different ethnicities, different countries, Jewish members, along with folks from Muslim countries, and they would say, you know what, I can't say this publicly in my out in the streets, but I'm going to say this privately here. I want to seek to learn. I want to seek to understand. And where we were able to talk and dialogue, and I mean, tears were shed. People are hugging each other. There's this a beautiful humanity that's happening of learning and understanding behind the scenes, and that's the power of like these to be able to do that. And what I'm seeing in the last few months, or even the last few years, like on college campuses, you've got folks that are wanting to shut that down and say, hey, if you disagree with me, if you have a different point of view than what I have, you're not. Let's not talk. Let's not dialogue. Let's not even discuss. I want to kick you off campus or whatever. I'm like, hold on a second. Yes. The greatest learnings, the greatest understanding, the greatest bonding that I had during my college and and educational experiences is when we were coming together and seeking common humanity. I don't know. So it's just frustrating to see some of that.
Well, and you're right on, and I think that's the beauty, and I will loop this into the hotel space and the food and beverage space, and that, when you get people together, and when people are, sitting at a dinner table for the first time and having conversations, because everybody loves their family. Everybody loves, everybody's dealt with hard things. And so that shared community is such a beautiful thing. And that was one of the most nefarious things about COVID, not just, speak on the business side, but the divisiveness that allowed people to be able to get into literally their own world of, social media or whatever they were doing, and not understanding that let's talk about what the struggle is with the person next door. Let's build those relationships, and a sense of community is so terribly important. And you're just nailing it. And had the same experience. And even with our, and I want to thank to our team during those times. And we had a lot of those conversations. But there were other people that you saw as part of team members that just they were in their own world too. And you're trying to lead everybody, and you're trying to make sure that people stay together. It's a very divisive time. And in May 24th, when the death in Minnesota occurred, I had told my brother in Knoxville, sitting at a restaurant downtown in March, I think 14th, I said, I just want to tell you, you should be prepared that there could be something that's going to catalyze something, some unrest or something like that. And he kind of looked at me like, go put your tinfoil hat back on. And he kind of was like, are you serious, man? So I've seen this before. And unfortunately, people take advantage of that. And there are people that engineer those things because they see that. Just to your very good point about what's going on the college campuses, we were very lucky not to have that happen at Harvard when I was there right in the heart of it. We graduated April 19th and walked through Harvard Yard peacefully. And then, 4 or 5 days later, it was covered in tents, right? Mm-hmm. And so, it's touching everybody's life. And I think that, it's we kind of have to go through it in some ways. It's almost like a mass hysteria. And then like societally, people kind of realize, well, that wasn't really a good idea. But the damage that occurs in that interim is want to avoid, and to be proactive about it. So I think getting people together, having conversations, being open to listening, and having people just spend time around each other is such a beautiful thing. And I think that's where we all win.
Well, yeah, some of my favorite times were, like you said, breaking bread, sitting across table from people and just having those conversations. It's amazing how many important conversations can be had just over a dinner table, and the act of fellowship and eating and asking questions and seeking to understand. And it's one of my favorite things I get to do on this podcast. I invite people on that I admire and respect, who have done great things in the world. And I just, ask questions for a little bit of time and, seek to learn and seek to grow. So for people that are home, listening to this, what advice would you give young people, and also mid-career professionals? Here you are, mid-career professional yourself. You've got a long runway ahead of you, and you decided, you know what, I want to focus on some advanced education because I want to. What was the term you used? To future-proof yourself, or was that? You're right. So, what advice would you give mid-career professionals and young people today to help them in their career journey, help them in life?
It's always funny to give advice because I have a lot of humility to say, man, I hope I can give good advice. But I would truly say, surround yourself with great people. Be around people that make you better. There's a lot of studies that show that being around people that are positively, influential to you, and that do have a positive value system, you are, regardless of how internally strong and self-guided you are, we are all a product of kind of, who we're around. And that's not perfect. It's always imperfect. And sometimes you're around people that you're helping, and, keep your value system strong, always be, open-hearted, but willing to protect against, some of the other folks out there in the world. And then just try to educate, learn history, be around, be around people in your industry that are positive, that are good. And then have that, when good people see that there's somebody who's willing to listen and learn, and be able to, kind of be a pupil to a certain extent. And I probably tell my friends I listen and learn to them, and I have people say it to me, and it's not out of sometimes people don't know how to take that because they're like, hey, I always say that to people, like, man, I really love listening to how you speak. And then if they see that that's truly authentic, then that opens that door wide. Authenticity is key. I have no time or space for inauthentic people that have ulterior motives or another agenda. I say, when you see that, get away from that. They need to find help in other ways. If you can help them, great, but find a way to protect yourself against people that are inauthentic. And I just say, be open-hearted. There was I'm going to say something kind of funny here. Namaste is a word that gets used all the time in yoga. I was fortunate to go to Nepal last year, and when people greet each other there, they truly say it like hello, and you kind of feel like the yoga teacher saying it in the back of your head every time you hear it. But what it means, it's something beautiful. It means, this is my soul recognizing your soul, and it really they do it in a way that's just completely authentic and meaningful and beautiful. So I'd say, live the world like that, be protective of the other side, but always kind of go into the world with that, that willingness to learn, that willingness to open yourself up to the good that's out there, and to surround yourself with good people.
Oh, I love that. I did not realize that was kind of the official greeting. Is my soul is seeing your soul, recognizing your soul. And it's so true, because everybody wants to be seen and they want to be heard, right? And so if you have a person in society who feels like, hey, you know what? I'm not seen, I'm not heard, I'm not understood, man, that can lead you into some dark holes personally, right? And when you feel like you've been understood, and understanding comes from being seen, being heard, that's the opening for dialogue. Maybe just to add on to what you've just shared, two areas of education where I feel are extremely dangerous. I'm like you. I'm a huge education fan, but one of the things that I've been sharing with people recently is, I feel that the two areas that can be a bit dangerous is if someone has just a surface level understanding of a topic, but then they believe that they understand it all. Be like, that's a dangerous kind of position to be in. And that, so if you're going to learn something, take the time to kind of peel back the layers of the onion and go a little bit deep, so you understand, as much nuance as you possibly can. It takes some time. And then the other area where I've seen people get a little bit off track is where their education is 100% down a particular rabbit trail or a particular side, and that's all they see. There's no diversity.
Right.
And be like,
Yes.
like I'm in my own little echo chamber, and I am just going to get news and feedback and media and education from these points of view. And this is the way I look at the world. And I'm like, that is a really dangerous spot to be in. And so we need depth, but we also need diversity. And when you have both of those, I think you're able to walk into the world. And then when you have that engagement with somebody with namaste, it's like, hey, my soul's seeing your soul. I think you'll be able to have deeper, more meaningful conversations with somebody.
I mean, look, we just solved all the world's problems here, and I say that with a laugh, and I mean, my hand is over my heart saying it, because I think that absolutely solves a lot of the issues that are out there in the world, and you see it. I mean, those are great points, because people get so one-track mind from a knowledge perspective, from political perspective, and then they have to be open to the idea that I saw Arnie Sorensen speak when he had pancreatic cancer at a Marriott conference, and no one at the conference, I don't believe, knew it was new. He was on stage, and he said something because he knew what kind of trouble he might have been in, and he was a very good man. He said, when you meet people or when you're working within the organization, believe good intent, right? Believe that I'm coming to you with an idea that is, good for both of us, right? Mm-hmm. And if you're directing someone at a company, if you're doing that, or if you're with a family member, give me that credit to believe I'm coming at this discussion with some good intent. And I think that solves, a lot of problems too there.
Yeah, that's so well said. What type of books are you reading or have you read, maybe within the last year, or maybe even books in your career? You're like, man, Bob, this book fundamentally changed my life. It helped me see the world through a different perspective, or maybe it's just something that you really enjoyed and it really helped you on your business journey. Do you have any recommendations?
Yeah, I think there was and as you age, different books mean different things, right? Mm-hmm. Nobody ever crosses the same river twice, not the same person, not the same river. Yeah. I think Heraclitus said that maybe. So, a book that kind of shifted a little bit of my mindset years ago was Guns, Germs, and Steel. And it's been, there's probably some flaws and different things about it. But when I listened to it, book on CD, 20 something years ago, it gave me a sense of why the world evolved the way it did, good and bad. And then also, kind of just allowed for me to understand why people do things. What's the motive behind anything? I look to nature a lot, and biomimicry, and how nature always kind of has an answer. I'm an outdoorsman. I look to, nature doesn't really do anything without a purpose. So, always utilizing that as a guide. I loved The Mind of Wall Street was a great book by Leon Levy, who was one of the Oppenheimer fund founders. And, his was about kind of behavioral finance. And it's not a heavy read, but it's about, how Wall Street or human nature or whatever is driven by, some emotion. And there's some reasons behind that. When you see market crashes or you see market, just kind of bubbles, what's the rationale behind that? You look at crypto, you look at Roaring Kitty today with, GameStop, so what's behind these kind of the motives of this as a group side. And you kind of, it helps you identify when there are, overzealous downturns or upturns, and to find kind of a more of a grounded version of it, of whatever's going on in the world. And so I think those are those types of books that, inform history, inform, behavioral finance. And all that is just trying to see what's happened before so that you can kind of future-proof yourself and understand the future a little bit better. I love those types of books.
Oh, that's great. I'm always in the mode of getting a new book recommendation. And you've given me a couple there that I've not read. I've had two of the ones I'll share with you. I'm just looking here on my desk. I've found this to be absolutely fascinating. Scott Galloway wrote The Algebra of Wealth, a simple formula for financial security. I found this to be, I thought, a great primer for young people getting started. I'm going to have my kids read it. I thought, well, it takes very complex kind of business life advice down into a book that I think it's really easy to understand. And so I found that one to be fascinating. And since you mentioned cryptocurrencies and blockchain technologies, one that I've picked up, Lynn Alden is a financial advisor, and she wrote a book called Broken Money: Why Our Financial System is Failing Us and How We Can Make It Better. And really, it's amazing what she's put into this book and the history of financial markets and currency globally, and then what kind of where we are right now. And then she starts getting into some of the revolution of Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies and whatnot. But I've found both of those to be extremely fascinating.
I have now both those books on my list here.
Well, that's good. I love it when we're able to share ideas and things that we're both finding exciting and, new information that we can put into our business. Well, I tell you what, one of the questions that I have asked so many of our guests here recently, and I guess it's even more apropos now as we're leading into a November election. But one of the questions that I've asked guests, I said, you know what, imagine that President Biden has said, you know what, Larry, I'm going to let you do the next State of the Union address. I'm going to give you the mic. You're going to be in front of Congress. You're going to speak to all the American people. And I want you to give a message of hope and optimism, something maybe inspirational, or, for just whatever's on your heart, what's on your mind, you get to do it, right? If you had that opportunity to speak to the American people, what would you say? Do you have something that's kind of, you'd be like, you know what, I'd really want to kind of go down this path. I'd want to inspire. I'd want to encourage. What would you say?
It's a big question, so I'll create myself some space by saying that.
Yeah, no, I know. I'm putting you on the spot. You're like, oh, I got to take a State of the Union address in like 30 seconds.
I'll keep it super fundamental. I would say in this world of text and email and social media, I would say pick up the phone and call somebody that you love or that that needs some help, and reach out to that person. And that will start to make the world a little bit better place. Or go do something, take cookies to somebody or take a meal to somebody. Some close friend or family member, pick up the phone to do that, because all the things that we deal with, some of those are going to be outside of our control. I would say, call somebody, reach out, talk to people. And I think that is, it goes back to our breaking bread together. That goes down to humanizing the other side. And I think that, giving a break to each other, and to know that, everybody, is imperfect, and people are going to say things when they've been frustrated, but to have a little more forgiveness for each other and a little more positivity and a little more human interaction. I would say that's what I would say to the world.
And to add the gentleman's quote a few moments ago that you referenced is that anticipate the best, or say that again. What was it? Anticipate the best in people, or
I would say believe good intent.
Believe in good intent. That was the quote. Yes, that was perfect.
Because if you start, it's kind of like a reputation, right? If you see the same person walk across the room that is a really good person, and you see that person, whatever they do is going to feel good. If you have maybe an erroneous view or an accurate view, if they are just not a good person, they can't do anything right. So you got to, if you're going into a conversation, family member, business meeting, political leader, person on the street, you've got to, have some level of prejudgment to protect yourself. If you see somebody walking towards you with a knife, you should probably be careful, right? But in general, you need to kind of give people at least the option to show themselves who they are. And, it goes back to, the MLK statement, judge a person by the content of their character rather than, the color of their skin. But that means how they're dressed or whatever. Don't prejudge too much. Prejudge to protect yourself, again, if something's, potentially dangerous. But be open and go into every opportunity like that, because hopefully you'll learn something beautiful.
That is a great way to end the podcast. Larry, I appreciate your insight. And thank you for walking us through your business and all the great things that you're doing in the world. I've learned a lot from you this afternoon, and I've got a few things that you have shared. Not only books that I'm going to read, but ideas that I'm going to ruminate on a little bit further and make sure that I am putting those into practical application in my life. Coming at a very, very good time. But, I've known you for a while now. You and I are involved in multiple various networks, not just because we graduated from the prestigious University of Tennessee, but other things as well. And I certainly look forward to our friendship continuing to grow and hopefully for us to be able to be involved in business together in the future. But I just want to say thank you for what you're doing in your community, not only in Memphis and in Nashville and Tennessee, but also the way that you're leading your team. 28 different states around the country, the various hotels that you're investing in, you and your family, and providing jobs, providing opportunity, providing education, and being part of the backbone of these great destinations, places where families like mine can go and enjoy, but also where you can just continue to pay into those communities and do great things. And the world needs more people like you. So I just want to say how much I greatly respect you. I just want to say thank you for your leadership and your friendship.
Wow. All right. I'm about to get a tear in my eye after all that beautiful commentary. I mean it. When I met you, I immediately knew we met in a Delta Sky Lounge, and I saw something on your jacket, and I said, "Hey, I just said, we know each other." You immediately knew one of my close friends, that I've known since 2016, who I'm very close with, and then we were able to meet over Thanksgiving in Knoxville with your wife and my fiance now, and you know good people when you see them, and I know you're a good man, and you're doing great things, and you've shared a lot with me, and I foresee us to have a lot more fun together. And I mean fun, not as a shallow term, but that means like working with great people in a profitable, whether they're profiting a community or profiting a business sort of way, that's a beautiful thing. So surrounding yourself with great people and people like yourself. And I'm honored to have been part of the podcast and appreciate you really reaching out and making it happen.
Oh man, it's been a blessing. And I look forward to how our paths continue to cross in the future and what we get to do. But thank you once again, Larry. It's been amazing.
Absolutely. My honor. Thank you.
Today's episode was engineered by Mitch White with graphic and marketing by my daughter, Tristan White. Special thanks to Larry for taking time to share with us his insights and thoughts. Make sure to subscribe on Apple Podcasts, or if you're an Android user, check us out on Spotify or wherever you go to listen to your favorite pods. If you like the show, please share it with a friend and give us a review. That's always appreciated. We look forward to spending time with you again next week. And you know what? Do us a favor. Be a little bit more like Larry. Realize that something as simple as a smile to a stranger can be disarming, engaging, and uplifting. Pass one along today and make the world a happier place.